guilty.
Sorry, I had the wrong one. I deleted the wrong one. I apologize. I'm so sorry, Kathryn.
It was still Kathryn, I think.
It was. So
that was all my fault, everybody.
Oh yeah. Welcome. We are in progress here with another episode, and we have the wonderful Kathryn Houghton on tonight. So different Kathryn, but we're very, very happy to have her. I actually know Kathryn from my university days. So we worked at the Writing Center together, and I know she's an avid reader and writer of both fiction and nonfiction. But I'll let her introduce herself. You want to tell us a little bit about you, Kathryn?
Yeah, Kathryn Houghton. I teach writing and editing at Michigan State University, and I do my own projects on the side. I do some editing as well. I have an MFA in fiction from Eastern Washington University, and I kind of just like to dabble in all things related to the written word. I also have a bunch of dogs who may or may not be making surprise appearances during this show.
We love it. We love the surprise appearance by animals. So looking forward to it. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hello. You should know me, but if you don't, this is where you're at. You're at Going Now, and I'm Joe Compton, and I'm happy to be here. Author of a couple books, and, I'm here.
A couple wonderful books that are like crime thriller, police procedurals. So I am Julia Allen. I write as J.K. Allen, and I actually set up my pre-order for our Halloween book today. So I am so excited. We do like to talk about what we're working on. So me and my sister have been working our butts off on writing this Halloween short story compilation of like horror and dystopian and stuff. And so it's like so exciting to be in that like final phase where you're just like, no, we're just waiting for it to get reviewed and then we can share the link and all that fun stuff. But what have you been working on these days, Kathryn?
I just finished about a month or two ago working on my second travel writing book on day trips you can take in the state of Michigan. It's actually a revision of a previous edition, but it needed a big update, especially post-COVID when all the travel industry went insane. So yeah, that's out next month.
That's so exciting. Yeah. When books like come out, it's like the most like rewarding process, but it's like, oh my gosh, every decision, like matte cover, glossy cover, like it's just like every decision is so anxiety inducing, but we got that all set up. Is there anything that Joe is working on right now?
Actually, I am actually in the process of writing a carnival horror novella that I was actually kind of brought on by a writing group I belong to, and they were looking for a certain subject. So I said, okay, maybe I'll give it a try, and I've been tackling that. I'm just in the process of revising. So Three Furies Press picked up my first book, which I self-published about 6 years ago, and now, more than that, almost 10 years ago now. I don't know, somewhere around there. But I'm revising it, and I added 2 extra chapters that weren't in the original as kind of like an extra, So it's like it's like the second edition book, and so I finished those, and now we're editing the book completely, and then I've got to get going on the third book here pretty soon. I got to get that done pretty quickly, but yeah.
That's so exciting. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. Yeah. I'm working on re-releasing some of my original stuff, and yeah, carnival horror sounds so awesome. Like,
it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun figuring out a new way to make people scared of going to the circus.
Yeah. Now, what era is it set in? That's what I'm interested in.
Probably more modern day.
Okay.
I have this thing about Circus Soleil, and so I think I'm really leaning toward that. I've been dealing more with the psychological aspects of things right now. I haven't really developed everything. You know me, I'm a pantser, so I don't get into the nuts and bolts right away. So I've been just working on a couple characters, really, putting that together. And so, but yeah, I think I want to kind of combine the two, Circus Soleil and like, the circus I remember as a kid kind of thing. So that's
That's awesome. Sorry, I'm making a lot of noise over here with my light that I knocked over because I'm a klutz. But I am curious to know, as a fellow editor, are you a pantser or a plotter, Kathryn?
Oh, definitely a pantser.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely.
I love it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm a little bit of a mix, but like I'd like to have an idea of like what's going to happen in the chapter when I sit down, and then I kind of pant like how I get to that point. But I have to kind of have a goal, otherwise I'm like wandering aimlessly. Like, how did I end up in this corner and unable to turn around? So.
It helps that I've been doing shorter stuff recently.
Okay.
And then I do some reverse outlining. When I finish, I'll often write up an outline.
Yes.
And that helps me when I revise.
Oh yeah, I definitely recommend outlines for editing to people all the time. That's like the easiest hack to see, like if something's got too much of plot A. Oh, I see a little ear.
Yeah, this is Star.
Yeah, hello. But yeah, so tell us. So you like to write the short stories, and obviously you do the travel writing with the local places in Michigan, which I'm going to have to pick up your book because we're exploring more and more now that things are getting safer. But
Right.
what genre of fiction do you write?
I've sort of dabbled in a couple of different areas, and I guess, to sound really like hoity-toity for a minute, I tend to write literary fiction.
Okay.
I've been playing with fairy tale retellings and some magical realism in the last couple of years. I haven't done when I'm working on the travel books, I don't spend much time doing fiction writing. I can't seem to make my brain switch back and forth that fast. But the story I'm trying to get published right now is fairy tale retelling of Hansel and Gretel. And so I'm having fun sort of playing with like a dark magic type idea.
Oh, I love it. Dogs on both sides. You're surrounded. I love it. That sounds absolutely fascinating because I know Hansel and Gretel is not one of the ones that have been done over and over. So right. You can really do a lot with that that stuff. So that's fantastic. So when you talk about writing shorter stuff, like what length of, like how many words are we talking usually?
5,000 to 7,000.
Okay. So like true short story.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
I can't do the shorts, like, under 1,000 words.
Oh, like the drabbles.
I can't be that concise, apparently.
Right.
I've read some absolutely wonderful stuff at that length, and it's like magic to me how people can do that. I need a bit more space.
Yeah, I find it really tricky too. I either write like 2,000 word short stories or like 11,000 or longer. Like there's no in between, and there's no drabbles for me going on.
I've toyed with the idea of a book, and I've started one a couple of times, but I haven't been able to keep my own interest for that long yet. Okay. And if I can't keep my own interest, I'm not keeping someone else's interest. So short story until I get till I really hit on something that I don't want to let go of.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So approaching the nonfiction stuff that you do you do it in segments so that you can kind of, because nonfiction you can kind of segment, right? And you can kind of do one piece and then kind of they come together and they can be concisely put into one collection.
Yeah, for my travel writing especially. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's nice because then you can divide it like by city or location and like the thumb area and stuff. Yeah.
The trouble with those is I get put on deadline with the publisher I work with. Mm-hmm. And so I know the first one I published, which came out in 2018, was on small towns in Michigan. And I worked, including travel, I probably worked 1,000 hours in like 15 months.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So I had no time I didn't read. I didn't, that was pretty intense, but usually it's not that intense.
Yeah. Now, did you like doing the research for that? I mean, it's got to be great to be able to travel around and be like, oh, let me check out this restaurant and write about it.
It was a really interesting, I used to joke to people, I said, I went to grad school to learn how to lie better, and now they want me to do research and tell the truth, and I don't know what to do. So I did a lot of like history type research, really research I'd never learned to do even in college. So sort of like teaching myself as I went around, and I had a fantastic editor that I was working with, who was able to help me when I did not know what I was doing. And then I'd go around and talk to people and sort of get their stories and photograph and just walk around and get a general sense of the place.
Nice. Yeah. That's really interesting. Now, I know that you started out with fiction, and you did your MFA in that. So what do you love about fiction, and what do you love about nonfiction?
I like fiction. I really love getting in the head of characters. I really like sort of the freedom you have to. So I don't like, I'll talk about myself all day long. I don't really like to write about myself.
Gotcha.
So I found this sort of, this little section of nonfiction that I can talk about things that are true, but that I can do it in a very sort of insular way where I don't have to open up too much. Because I feel like, wow, sorry about that. Someone got tackled. When I write fiction, I really feel like I get incredibly personal, just in a different way, but I don't have to talk about me. So
Right. You can explore like different aspects of yourself without being like, let me tell you about my trauma at age 5.
Right. And I often, when I've written essays over the years, and I have, and I've got some that I really enjoy, I'm often trying to figure myself out. And once I feel like I've got that, I don't want to work on it anymore, but then it's only half done.
Right.
So I use it as sort of more self-discovery. And I've got some friends who do essays and creative nonfiction and memoir type stuff, and they do it wonderfully. And again, it's like the flash fiction for me. I'm like, you're magical.
Yeah, it really is magical. And I'm just like, my memory is not good enough to do a memoir. Like, I remember what happens to me. I remember how I feel, but like, just give the exact details and the people involved would just be way too much.
Yeah. And then I start doing, wouldn't it be cool if this had happened?
Instead, right. Why don't we just conflate these two people into one character? And yeah. And then we get into like how creative is creative nonfiction. Yeah.
Right. Which is a fascinating discussion, and one that I've taught in classes before. Because I think it's fun to talk about, but we all sort of have to find our own balance for it. And I'm a stickler for details.
Right. I feel like if you're going to say it's like a true story, then like the embellishments should be a minimum, like otherwise make it like based on a true story, like we do have that genre as well. But I did want to talk about reading today because like as soon as I was like trying to think of like topics to have for the show, I immediately thought of you and was just like, I know you're a great reader as well as a writer. So kind of how did you get your start in reading, and how did you get your start as a writer?
I was thinking about this one ahead of time because both things have always been such a part of my life. It's hard. It's sort of hard to identify that first moment. I know for reading, so I was born in 84. And so I was growing up right around the time of Little Mermaid. I was like hitting my, early reading stage when Little Mermaid was coming out. And we had this book that I would insist my parents read to me every single night about the Little Mermaid. And I think it was one of the ones that like you could push the buttons on the side and it would like make noises and talk to you. And I memorized it. And my poor parents must have been so sick of me. And I sort of learned a decent amount of reading from trying to read it myself when my parents weren't there, flipping the pages and just like saying the words aloud. And goodness, and writing ever since I could string together sentences in written form, I think. I remember in 5th grade getting kicked out of the classroom floor, off the floor, because I wanted to read like a 20-page story. All my classmates are reading like 3 paragraphs, and I'm like, I have a 20-page story about aliens? And my teacher's like,
nice.
Okay, 3 pages, that's good.
Right. So yeah, and I've always like I know there are some writers that say like they never read because they don't want to be influenced by like other people's stories and ideas, and I'm just like I cannot fathom that, because for me like reading and writing have both like fed into each other. Do you find that's the same for you?
Yeah, if I'm not reading, I'm sort of missing half the battle. I mean, writers write,
Right.
and I have not always been great about that aspect of it, especially when I teach writing all day long.
Right.
But when I'm reading, my writing brain is absolutely working. And I'm not worried about sort of being influenced, because we're all influenced by everything we experience in our lives.
Right.
And so why avoid the cool stories just because it might influence you? I see that as a positive thing, not a negative.
Right, because like there's no such thing as an original idea, but it's the way that you write about it and the characters you bring to life that make the difference. Like I totally agree, and I just like every time someone says that to me, I'm like, but how? So
I legit have panic attacks about how one day I'm going to die and there will be a book I am halfway through, and like that just brings me to tears.
Right. Well, I'm sure as a teacher too, you try to like instill like a love of reading for your students, and especially like because a lot of times the books that we read in high school are not the best. So when you get caught to college, you're just like, oh God, another assigned reading. So you're exhausted by then. But what is your favorite book? I'm curious.
I never have a favorite. I sort of have like a pool of favorites I like to draw from. Maybe the book I engage with most often is I really love the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. And I am listening to it on audiobook, sort of on repeat. It takes me about a year to get through. It's something I've read maybe 30 times, and I can pick up and put down and pick up and put down. But then like I find myself going back to Carol Maso a lot. Some of her work, I was introduced to her in undergrad in the English department in like one of the few English classes I took. I go back to Lolita again and again, which sort of feels like, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
And I tend to, my favorite book at the moment tends to be the most recent thing I read that got 5 stars from me. So lately I've been really digging The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. I read it in April, and I just restarted it like last week because I want to sort of dig into the story again.
Right. So do you find that you like to reread stuff so that you can kind of like read for it to enjoy it and as entertainment, and then evaluate it as a writer the second time?
Yeah. I recently in the last couple of years discovered that I have ADD, ADHD, whatever they're calling it these days. And for a long time, we didn't really realize that, because I could sit down and I could devour a book. You know, I could sit down and read for 8 hours. But give me 3 days after finishing a book, and I can't tell you anything about it anymore. I don't retain it. I'm not really paying close attention when I read. So when something really gets to me, I go back to it. And in some ways, it's like, I'm reading it for the first time again. Like, I didn't know this happened.
I totally can relate to this. I actually got diagnosed like last month. So I am like, it gives you a lot of answers that you're just like, now this makes sense. And yeah, one of the things is like you do lose a lot of details, and like you're just like, oh my gosh, I remember loving this book, but I'm not exactly sure what happens, or I can't remember the ending. I remember the middle, but I can't remember the end. So I also do a lot of rereading, which also, as an anxious person, is just really nice, because you're like, I know it's going to have a happy ending. Because sometimes I read books and they have like the saddest ending, and then I'm just like, what did I do to myself? Like, now I'm going to be depressed for 2 weeks until I read another book and that's happy. But yeah, I really think that's great. What are some of the things, like, since you do go back and reread books and kind of look at it as a writer, like what do you look for as you're doing that? Because I know some people have a hard time switching from like just enjoying a book as a reader and then looking at it as a writer.
To me, that's always sort of been one and the same. Now, if I want to look at it, what's the big difference for me is looking at like writing from my students, which feels more like a job.
Okay.
It's a job I love. But for me, reading like a writer is sort of how I read. Lately, I've been focusing on sort of transitions, not between scenes, but between individual moments.
Okay.
I have a tendency to, if I have a character upstairs and they need to come downstairs and have a conversation, I have to follow them every step of the way, which is just boring. And so I've been paying attention a lot lately to how characters sort of move in space and how they get from one moment in a scene to the next moment in a scene. Because that's something that I've noticed is a weakness of mine. So I've been fascinated in the different ways writers do that.
I love that because I feel like that's why I read, is to learn how to work on my flaws as a writer. Yeah. Because you see how other people do it and how other people do it so well and so successfully, and then you're like, okay, how do I incorporate that into my own writing? So I love how you said like reading as a writer, but how do you write as a reader? Like, how does that work for you?
I think I write as a reader. I think I more revise as a reader. Write as a reader. I sort of write with whatever that comes to me. And sometimes that means cutting off mid-scene and starting somewhere new. Because I'm like, I am writing myself into a corner here. So, it can mean jumping around. But in revision, and that was a skill I had to learn. That one did not come naturally to me. Like reading like a writer always sorry, this is Plume and she's very rude. Sort of always came naturally to me, but writing always came so easy for me that I never really learned how to put myself in the audience's shoes because I was better at it than my classmates. So I never got feedback growing up about like, hey, here's how you could be better. It was just like, good job, A+. And so I never really thought about it. And so in the last, I was going to say few years, but I've been out of grad school for 11 years now, really been thinking about tension is the big thing I think about as when I'm writing, thinking about the reader and what they're feeling. And I was introduced in grad school to this idea of, you have to go away, of short lines of tension and long lines of tension. So if you're writing a book, you've got a long line of tension that goes through the whole thing, but each chapter is going to have a shorter one. Each scene will have a shorter sort of line of tension. And that's helped me think about how to put my stories together, but I'm still not very good at practicing it. But that's really from, I think, the reader perspective as well.
Right. You want to get that pacing on point to kind of keep them flipping the pages, but you also, the thing about tension is like you also need to release it at some points. So I think that's something that can be hard because I know like I've read books where I'm just like it's building and and I'm like, okay, like I need a breather, like
it just something needs to happen.
I need a little bit of release and then we can go back to the exciting stuff. But yeah, I love that. I specifically love how you like section off and like compartmentalize like really the areas that you need to focus on because like, you do so well in other areas, but like it is a strength to be self-aware enough to be like, you know what, I suck at having the characters do stuff while they talk. Like that's one of my big things is it's just a wall of dialogue and I'm like, but what are they doing while they're just spitting words at each other? So adding in all of that stuff. But like that is one thing that I noticed like a lot of like new authors have a hard time recognizing where they're maybe not as strong as far as like they know what they're good at, but they don't really necessarily know what needs work. So I love how you are really
it's a learned skill. The first moment it hit me, I was in, what have I been, 10th or 11th grade, and it was like the first week with a new English teacher, and he asked us to write about who we were as writers, and I wrote this piece about how I'm so good and I'm so amazing, and he wrote back, really? ? And I was pissed. But then it was also the first time that I'd like been challenged on it.
Right.
And once I got over my initial anger, I was able to stop and think, okay, there are things I can learn. And so that was a long process for me. It was even continuing in graduate school. My first story was not super well received. I was really proud of it. And then it was just this horrific event for me. But I learned so much about sort of how to view my own writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm curious with the tension aspect of things, and reading, books. Do you find that you gravitate to the genre you write, and reading those books? Did they help you find? Do you become naturally, you have a natural tendency to know where the tension is going to be because you know the genre, and where to step and not to step, and know where the readers are.
Somewhat. I cannot. I don't read a ton of fantasy, but the fantasy I come back to, I tend to read again and again and again, and I have a few authors that I tend to return to. But I can't wrap my head around that one. I've tried writing fantasy so many times, like high fantasy, and it just feels so cliche and so mundane, and nothing happens, and then everything happens, and so yes and no. It's worked for me much better, I think, in what I would call the literary writing. But I have wanted to like write a like hefty fantasy novel, and I apparently have more studying to do before I can figure that one out.
I feel you on that, because I like one of the first novels that I attempted, and I got over 40,000 words in and kind of fizzled out, was like a high fantasy kind of thing, and I just like realized after 40,000 words, I'm like, this sounds a lot like the Lord of the Rings. Like, I just like kind of like let it fizzle out, because I was just like, this is a little too derivative, and I need to like sit and rethink. And I did. I mean, it did have its moments, and it had its own like its own charm, and it did have its own plot where it was like, okay, this is an idea for me, but it just felt too echoey, like too. Because I've definitely read fantasy books where I'm like, okay, this is just like Aragon's character is this guy, and then like
I feel like that's where research helps too. I feel like that's where research kind of makes your own voice authentic a little bit, by going and researching mundane ideas or things that you wouldn't think are very important, but to you they might be, because they're a crux in your story. So you research it, and then you find that you can get a voice of your own, kind of, even if it is the central plot is Lord of the Rings, you can kind of turn it on its head, because you're going to concentrate on the ringlets of the tree, or something that obviously Tolkien's a bad example, because he wrote about every aspect of every detail of everything. but even Robert Jordan is also one of those who basically told you what color flower you were smelling and why you were smelling it, and all those things. So but for crime especially, it's easy to kind of just get lost in the research, and then develop,
get the ideas from what you're researching. That's a great tactic for sure. So do you read the same genre that you write? I know you said you've read some fantasy and you have a hard time writing fantasy, but like otherwise, do you read a lot of the classics to get kind of that literary feel going? Or
no, I don't read a lot of classics. I tend to read mostly stuff from like the last 30 years. So things that are more, things that are more sort of contemporary to me. I have read a lot of the classics, but I almost feel like obligated at times, which is the wrong word, because I have enjoyed some of the classics.
Right.
But, and we talked about this in my creative writing class this past year, a little bit, like what makes a classic. In a lot of ways, it's pretty arbitrary. It's based on, the people who are in power and who are assigning these things. And for a long time, I really thought I liked classics because, again, I was this cocky little high schooler. I understood them. I could talk about them in English class, and no one else was able to like finish the whole thing. And I'm like, let me tell you about theme. Let me tell you about symbolism. And so I felt really proud of myself. And
the green shirt means money, right?
I returned to some of those as an adult and really been not disappointed, but just they don't touch me. And I won't, I used to, in a lot of ways, read for understanding and, so I could show off my knowledge. And now I read for something a bit deeper that a lot of classics can't give to me. But I tried Sound and the Fury last year. And that one just blew me away. And the first time I tried to read that, I thought it was horrible, and I gave up after like 30 pages.
Right.
Different books speak to us at different times, and I think that's true with the classics as well. So they're worth returning to.
Yeah, I think there's
They're
a
not my
level of
favorite.
maturity you need, right? Sometimes you need a level
Right.
of maturity in some of those because they're dealing with a little bit more deeper subject matter in some aspects. And,
Right.
you know,
And, you know, I read, for example, The Awakening. So that's not really a novel. What would we call that? A novella from Kate Chopin. And I read it in high school, and I was just furious. I was like, I can't relate to this character. How dare she make these choices? She is wrong. This is morally wrong.
Right.
And then I reread it about 10 years later, and I thought, I get her. I understand. Like, I haven't been in that situation still. But for me, a lot of it has also been like empathy and opening up to those different types of characters.
I think reading is so important for empathy. I can totally relate to what you're saying though, because as like a gifted high school kid, I like even in middle school, I was like, oh yeah, I'm reading the classics, just to brag and feel smart. So I read a lot of classics in like middle school and high school, and then it's like I didn't discover like fantasy and other genres until much later. And then I was like, oh, I love these, and then started just reading everything and anything I could. But yeah, I feel like I can really relate to you read one genre but write a completely different one. But the thing I love about reading is that you can learn from every genre. Like if you're struggling to write a relationship between two characters, like read a romance and see how they play off the tropes and how they develop from, the beginning when they meet to when they fall in love. If you need a lesson in world building, then it's great to pull out a fantasy and just be like, okay, like how do they construct the world and not just info dump and just give you a bunch of information. So I really love like reading widely because you can learn so much from different books in different genres. So you talked about you do a lot of rereading. What was your comfort read again?
A Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time. Okay.
Yeah. That's one that I go back to a lot.
And now is that just because like you're so familiar with the plot, or because like the writing style you really connect to, or?
Yeah, I think all of that. I have been reading it on and off since I think I was in 7th grade.
Right.
And so the series was not finished.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew with the series, and, it's got 15 books if you count the prequel.
Right, okay.
And so it took such a large sort of investment of my time. So I'm familiar with it, but I'm also discovering new things. And I do like there's always going to be trouble when you do a series with, you can't go back and edit the first book when you write the last book. There's always going to be, yes, and I would read it to my sister. I think sometimes she would not want to be read to.
Awesome, yeah.
And, but yeah, I think it's comforting for me, but I also will like rewind it and be like, because I'm often listening on audiobook to that, like while I'm doing the dishes or whatever. And I'll rewind it and be like, wait, how did this happen? How did we get here? Like, what made this moment?
I love that. Now, do you have like a certain process that you go through while you write? Like any rituals, or like do you listen to music, or?
Can't listen to music.
Have to have silence. Okay.
Right. I have to have silence. I can't have the TV on. I can't have, I live alone other than the dogs, and that's background noise to me. When they start making noise, I can handle that. But I don't have a lot of rituals. Last summer, I had started sort of a morning writing thing. People had been telling me for years, write in the morning. And I said, no, I hate writing in the morning. I hate mornings. And then I did it all summer, and I thought, okay, they were right all along. But I really like, just in life in general, not having rituals. I like every day being different than the last. And so, and especially with my abundance of dogs, they're always keeping me on my toes. So since grad school, I've tried to write when I can. which isn't always when I want to. Mornings were the best. I need to start doing it again. I'd go sit on my deck before the sun got really hot, and I'd put my feet up, and I'd have like a glass of water, and I'd just write for like an hour, and it was awesome.
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, I need to tomorrow, honest, maybe. But yeah, I've never really gotten into the rituals or anything. They haven't worked for me, haven't helped me, so. It just became another way for me to put it off. Like, I'll do this first, and then I'll do this first.
Right. I know that can help for some people to just get into the writing mindset, but for some people, they just, they don't always work. Like, because I've tried to do rituals where I'm like, let's get that Pavlov's dog's like reaction going on and like get into the writing mood. And it's just like, for me, like I said, what helps me is just having a goal of knowing like I want to get to this point in the story when I sit down to write. And then that really helps me to kind of figure out, okay, how do I get to that point? And then I start writing. But let's see. So what do you do when you get writer's block? Like, what do you find inspires you, whether it's for a new story or if you've hit a block and you need to get past it? Like, what really helps you out?
Lately, because I did not have an answer to this question for a very, very long time. Writer's block was an absolute like dead end for me. And I just stuck till I get new inspiration. Lately, I've been reading a lot of nonfiction, but not memoirs, like history type books.
Nice.
And not historical fiction, but like right now I'm reading Children of Ash and Elm, which is a history of the Vikings, really well researched by a historian / archaeologist. And I'm reading about like people and groups of people when I'm picking up these types of books. And it's giving me characters, it's giving me ideas, it's giving me mannerisms or ways of looking at the world that will sort of percolate in my head for a while until something that's not historical fiction pops back out.
Right. That's really fascinating to do your research that way, because you like Joe was saying earlier, do the research and it'll lead to the ideas.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I relate to that a lot. And sometimes that research is just looking around me. The first short story I published was when I didn't publish it in grad school, but I wrote it in grad school. And I would sit up in my bedroom on the third story of my apartment complex. And I was right on the end. And there was like a walkway between my building and the next building. And the woman who lived right across from me would go out in the middle of the night with a broom and she'd just sweep the sidewalk for like an hour. I never figured out why. And so one day I just wrote a paragraph about, a couple of paragraphs about like watching a woman sweep her sidewalk. Like it wasn't dirty, it just every night. And then it turned into this story about purity culture and purity balls and sort of a teenage rebellion a little bit, all from that image that I encountered in my life that just kept expanding and expanding and expanding.
That's so interesting. So you're a people watcher then?
Sometimes. I also am easily distracted. But when they're interesting, yes, then I can't stop watching.
Right. I find I'm either like super observant or I'm like, I don't see anything.
Yes.
Just in my own little world, just walking around like with my thoughts. Yeah. But when I do people watch it, like it is a really great way to get ideas because you're just like, they're on a first date and this is what, you just imagine like the conversation they're having and like the little bit of awkwardness between them and stuff as they're getting to know each other. And then all of a sudden you have a story idea. Like I remember in one of my fiction classes, I wrote a story that was an ex was returning a guy's sweatshirt. And then they kind of rekindled the romance. But there was someone watching them and it was like, oh, this is cute. It's a first date. And it was just really interesting to get it from each person's perspective, which was the assignment. It was like right from 3 different POVs of the same scene happening. So I thought that was really interesting. So do you write more than one book at a time? You said you can't do nonfiction and fiction at the same time.
Yeah, usually because of the time commitment.
Right.
As soon as I start working on a new book project, all my fiction gets pushed to the side. I might pull it out for some revisions every now and then. But I can write more than one story at a time, since I'm mostly working on stories right now. I can write more than one at a time, but I often don't. I'm usually revising maybe 6 or 7 at once.
Okay, yeah.
But that to me is different than the writing. I'm usually writing a bit here, writing a bit there, writing a bit here, writing a bit there, and then something will sort of catch for me, and then I'll finish that one, and often the other stuff gets put aside.
Okay.
Like I have to write 10 stories to find the one that works.
And then you focus on that one.
Yes.
Yes. Now, do you read the same way, or do you read like more than one book at a time?
Oh, I read lots of books at the same time.
Right. Yeah. I think my record is reading 5 books at the same time, and I was just like, oh yeah.
I'm actively in the middle of 3 books right now, 2 fiction, 1 nonfiction. But the stack of I'm partway through these books and I want to finish them soon is like 12 high on my night. Well, it's actually on my bookshelf now because it got too tall for my nightstand.
Yeah.
I dedicated a whole shelf to, I'm kind of reading these, but I got distracted.
Right. Thank you, ADHD, right? But I kind of love that for like different projects, especially when editing. So I also edit, but I love editing for other people's because it's like it's a new story to you. You haven't read it 1,000 times, and it's easy to be like, oh, this would be a great idea to help polish this up, and you can add character detail here and this and that. It's really easy for me to like analyze and look at and conceptualize. And then my stuff I really hate. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll have like the same as you, and I'll edit like 3 things at the same time, because then it's like, when you get fed up with this story, you just jump to the next story and you're like, I'm still being productive and getting work done, but you're not stuck on the same story. And I'll do that sometimes with writing as well, though, because I'll just be like, okay, I'm kind of running out of ideas in this story. So I'll jump to the next story.
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet of all my revision projects, what needs to happen on each, sort of where I'm at with each. And it's got maybe 25 pieces in it and some pieces I won't touch for 2 years or whatever. But I keep notes on where I'm sort of at in the process for 2,000 stories.
I need to be that organized. I really do, because it's out of sight, out of mind for me. Definitely. Like if I don't have like a notebook or I like to use binders, because then you can like rearrange the pages and stuff. So I'll use binders for stuff just so I like remember that I'm writing this story. I
think my spreadsheets are often a time waster, though. I think sometimes my organization is, hey, I'm being productive, but I'm not really doing anything.
Right. You're not writing. It's your way to procrastinate.
Right.
Yeah. What other ways do you procrastinate, do you find?
Oh, it's a good way to get my house cleaned, actually.
Right.
It's hard for me because since I started teaching writing, I feel like I have often felt like my own writing shouldn't be happening until I've finished everything else.
Right.
So instead of really, I procrastinate way more than I want to now, but I feel like I'm doing it for a reason. Like, hey, here's the way I make money.
Right.
And I do love my job. I do love teaching writing. I love working with the students at Michigan State. I teach some editing classes. I love it all. But often it's like, okay, well, there's 12 more things I could be doing for my students, so let's do that instead of doing this thing for me.
Right.
So I'm not sure I've done a lot of real procrastination lately, or rather it's all been procrastination, but
it's prioritizing.
But it also feels like a sham at some point. Like if I'm going to keep calling myself a writer, I need to stop only writing when everything else in my life is put together. It's like other things have to wait sometimes.
So how do you think you can go about and find the balance? Because you're super busy. Like you're a teacher, you have puppies and all this other stuff going on. So like, how do you think you can help to find the balance for your writing time?
I think it comes back to prioritization. I need to just sort of just get better at seeing things that are purely for me as being useful. Rather than sort of putting everyone else first. And like, as silly as that sounds, it's actually something I'm working with my therapist on right now. How can we do more of, because it's a part of my professional identity. I went to grad school for it. I teach it, and I feel like a fraud when I'm teaching it and I'm not doing it. But when I'm doing it, I'm not working on my teaching. So it's this. And I was warned about that from my grad school professors when I took a teaching job, and they said, this kills a lot of people's writing. I said, that won't happen to me. It happened to me. But I feel like having these book projects the last few years have helped with that, because, hey, I signed a contract and there's a date, and I haven't met my date so far on either of those books. Although the second time was COVID's fault, not my fault the second time. That sort of forces me into it and into seeing it as something to be prioritized. So I just need to get better at that.
I think my therapist told me this, like, do things that will, like, don't look at it as like a task to be completed and then reward yourself for that, but look at it as like, what's going to help Julia tomorrow? Like, sometimes that is going out and doing the hard thing, and sometimes that's relaxing and taking a break, and sometimes that's writing for myself because I know it'll make me happy, and sometimes it's doing work that needs to be done. So look at it more as like, how can you help Kathryn tomorrow? And I think that'll help you give yourself permission to do more for yourself, because that's really was like an epiphany for me. But I was just curious, because like nonfiction and fiction, I've done both at school. Obviously, that's a great thing about university and college. You can like try out a bunch of different classes and really see what fits for you. But how does the nonfiction affect your fiction writing? And vice versa. Yeah.
That's a really, really good question.
I love putting people on the spot.
I think the nonfiction writing in a lot of ways it has given me more of a sense of discipline. And, when I'm working on a book project, if I run into a problem, I have to solve that problem. I can't just put it in the drawer and not look at it for 10 years. It's no longer an option. And so it's also made me sort of tackle problems head on. It's also made me more comfortable asking for help, in that, I have an editor who is paid to help me. And so I got more comfortable with reaching out. And it's made me a little more confident reaching out to people about my fiction writing, which I always sort of felt like, you've got that romanticized idea of the fiction writer, in the attic somewhere where they, only come down for meals and they don't talk to people and they drink a bottle of wine every day. And I tell my students, and I don't practice it, I say, writing is it's not an isolated thing anymore, if it ever really was.
Right.
It really is a community, and we can really benefit by tapping into that community. It's made me more comfortable with that. And then I think going the other direction, I really in fiction like the sound of language. And I want things to have a rhythm, or to just. I really like the way a beautiful sentence feels and looks, and I feel like I carry that sort of attention to language over to my nonfiction in ways
which is great.
Yeah, it makes me happy. So.
No, I love it, because like when I was diagnosed with ADHD, my doctor was like, okay, get this ADHD adult book, and it'll really help you. They have short chapters, so you won't, it'll be easy to read. And then I get it, and it's like the most dry writing, and it's like, you can tell it's written by a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I really wish they had made this like at least a little bit more interesting, where I could like, get my attention focused on it and not just be like skimming for the boxes with the keywords in it.
Right. Which is what I'm loving about the Viking history that I'm reading right now. It's academic, but I find it incredibly readable. That it feels like super well researched, and she's a cat. She's not a cat, but she thinks she is. But I find it also really engaging. I
just love the tail coming up. Sorry. They're so
so
attention to me.
But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right. But I'm sorry, you're saying like the Viking book was
yeah,
just really engaging. Yeah.
And I have picked up a lot of nonfiction over the years that has had a topic I've been super interested in, but then I just can't do it because it's so boringly written. Where I do like 2 pages and I'm like, well, that's it. I did my job. I'm done for the
tried.
day.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it is hard when you pick up a book and you're just like, I can only get 2 pages in at a time. And then it's like eventually just like, I'm a big believer in like do not finish. Because they're like, I had a really hard time with this as a young person. And I was just like, I have to read everything. And then it's just like, you just cannot. There's not enough time in the world for books that we don't love and are not for us. Like there's so many good books out there. So do not finish, people.
It was guilt-inducing for a very long time.
It was, yeah.
And I still sort of struggle with it at times, but I've gotten better.
I had to ask my mom for permission. I was like, Mom, is it okay? This book is awful. It's just the worst story I've ever read. And I've only read like a couple pages and it's just so bad. And she was like, yeah, you don't have to, you have other books to read. And I was like, oh, thank God. But I needed permission to do it because I was just like, I felt so guilty at even the thought of
it is really guilt-inducing, but it's again something it's made me happier to sort of learn, especially when I started teaching. I stopped reading for quite a while. And then, because I was reading all day, every day, and you're reading college freshman papers. They're just not that great. My college freshman papers weren't that great. Like, nothing against college freshmen. They're just not that great.
Right.
And that's why they're in school and why they're learning. But then I'd come home and read a book that bored me and like, well, that's it. I can't read anymore. And now it's like, I have limited time to read. I better enjoy it. And if I don't enjoy it, oh, well, I'll donate it. I'll sell it. I'll give it to someone.
Yeah, for sure. Their books are definitely for different people.
I find that the older you get, the less bullshit you can put up with, and you just say, you know what, I'm only gonna do things I like.
Right. The cares lesson, and you're just like, I don't care anymore about what anyone thinks. I'm just not going to finish this one. Yeah. So how did you get out of the reading slump that you were in?
I actually had to make it a task. For a while. It was...
Agree with you, Anita.
I had to make it a chore for a while.
Right.
Except every time I did it, I felt really good afterward. I felt guilty taking time out of my busy life because I saw an old friend from high school a couple of weeks ago, and she just got married to someone we both knew in high school. And she said she was telling him about me and what I've been up to. And she's like, oh, well, she does this and she does this and she does this and she does this. And he stopped and went, yeah, that checks out. It for a long time, it was getting in the way. And then I made it a priority, which I just need to get better at doing with the writing. And now it is sort of a habit again.
Right.
Whereas before, and the freaking phones kill us. I used to read at every meal. I'd be eating my cereal with a book in one hand, and now it's my phone in one hand. So it's also for me about making those little changes.
Yeah. I don't know. There's just something about COVID and my brain got just like burnt out. And I just got into a huge reading slump. And now what I mostly read is like the books that I edit for people. And I'm just like, I need to get back into reading for like, just for fun and just to read.
Even if you love the work you're doing, if your work is reading, it becomes difficult. Yeah,
it does. Yeah. And the same with writing. If your work is writing, then it's hard to go home and be like, let me write some more. Because I know my dear friend struggles with that a little bit because she has to write so many articles a week for the magazine she writes for. And then by the time she gets home, you only have so much brain, left over.
It's the same with film too. Because I do so many film interviews with filmmakers and stuff like that. I have to watch their movies. And it's like, that's the only movies I get to watch because I have to watch them. I have to watch them.
Right.
It's like, and then I go, I find myself going back to like the same 3 movies after that. Like,
to like comfort yourself
Right.
and turn your
I've
brain
not
off a
seen
little.
Right.
Yeah, I've not seen a new release in probably 10 months, maybe a couple years even. I haven't been to
Right.
the movie theater because we couldn't go.
Right.
So it was like I used to take like movie days where I would go to the movie theater and catch up and spend the entire day there and watch like 3 or 4 movies. And I haven't done that in
Yeah.
years. And it's like,
Yeah.
so it's like, I'm so tired of watching movies, especially because when you watch a lot of these, they're not so good, and you're going, "Oh, I
Yeah.
gotta really find something good about this and say something really nice." And because
Yeah.
I'm very much like Kathryn. I don't want to say something bad about something, but I want but I always try to find the good in it first, and I won't
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about it unless I'm talking about the good in it, and so it's like. So
I used to review books, and I was the same way. And I actually ghosted my editor when I got a book I didn't like, and I didn't know how to handle it. And so I was just like, well, I'm not a book reviewer anymore.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I'm still embarrassed about that one.
I totally feel like I'd be the same though. Like I've reviewed a few books, but like I would always be like, I've read this book and I liked it, so I'm gonna give it. Like I would offer to review. If somebody asked me for a review, I'd have a really hard time because if I don't like it, then it's just like, oh gosh, what do I say?
Right. And usually I could find something positive, and because I don't want to lie. I mean, I all my fiction is lying, but not in reviews. I don't want to lie, but I read this book that I was just like furious at, and I wanted nothing to do with it, and I found no redeeming quality. Like I was just really salty about having read that book.
Right.
So I was just like, well, I'm just gonna disappear.
Yeah, no, I was really lucky. I reviewed a couple books for Joe for like about a year or so. But all the people he knew who were offering the books to me were great writers. So I got super lucky in that way. But like, yeah, on my blog and stuff, I would only review books that I had already read because I'm like, I know I like it and I'll throw it on my blog. But like I said, I lucked out on Joe's show because he just knows so many great writers. And I was like, oh, thank God. Every time I read a book, I'm like, oh, I gotta like this. Oh, thank God.
The worst part was it was a book I picked.
Yeah.
That is hard.
I was like, I want to read this book. Oh, no, I don't.
No, I don't. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah.
And it was a small indie author, and I really didn't want.
You really wanted to like it.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't, indie authors struggle enough. And
right.
I didn't want to say anything that was going to ruin it for them. It wasn't my cup of tea, but clearly other
it is for someone. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Plus there's so much negativity out there. You don't want to contribute to that, right? I mean,
yeah.
You feel like you're just you're piling on at that point. And it's kind of like, that's not the goal here.
Right. And a really nasty review like I wanted to write said way more about me than about the book.
Yeah.
Right.
Back to my, I don't want to write about myself.
Yeah. So you do have a book coming out next month. Tell us a little bit more about it.
So it's the second edition of a book called Michigan Day Trips by Theme. So I'm actually a co-author listed on this one because I did the revision. The original author, Mike Link, who wrote the first edition, is when this publisher was newer. And so he didn't live in Michigan.
Okay.
So they wanted someone who was, a native, and I've lived here for 34 of my 36 years.
Right.
So they wanted someone who was a native to get on the project and do the revisions and sort of get it updated. It was about 10 years old at that point. So I did a lot of researching, making sure addresses were right, making sure businesses were still open, making sure they still did these activities that we were saying. And then really personalizing the language to being more Michigan internal, I guess. So like, for example, the original book talked a lot about the LP, and I'm going, the LP, what the Lower Peninsula? And that makes
sense
to someone who's not from Michigan, but we never call it that.
No, we don't.
I have no idea what you're talking about. And, and that's not the original author's fault. That's,
Right.
being an outsider. And so I was excited to get a chance to work on this with the same team I worked with on my first book. And this one was different because I was doing as much revision as writing. I was taking out trips and adding new trips just to sort of freshen it up a bit.
Right.
But a lot of it was sort of that. It was almost copy editing at times when I'm fact checking and
right.
doing things like that. But then I'm, also writing up new trips. But that was, I don't remember. I think, Joe, it was you talking about it earlier. The little pieces, like each thing is about like this big on the page. So it was easy to get into and feel like I got something accomplished, and then step away and not feel like I was interrupting myself.
Yeah, that is a nice thing about being able to segment it in nonfiction as opposed to fiction, where you're like, I'm in the middle of a chapter, I can't walk away from it, or else I'm going to lose the thread.
Right. And this was great. Paragraph by paragraph, every paragraph was different.
Yeah. I know some people who kind of do that trick on purpose. So they'll finish in the middle of a sentence so that when they sit back down, they can get right into the flow of it. I just forget the end of the sentence by the time I come back to it.
I have also tried that. It also does not work for me.
Yeah, it really does not work for me. But we've really loved having you on. This has been a great conversation. Why don't you let people know where they can find you online, maybe where they can find your book next month, and anything else you want to talk about?
I'm at KathrynHoughton.com, though I admit it's a little out of date. I've been, again, COVID killed all of our productivity for everything, right?
Right.
But my book is, it's available for pre-order on Amazon. And if you're in Michigan, a lot of the little local bookstores have copies. So I always encourage people to buy from local bookstores if at all possible. Just because I love bookstores and I want them to live forever.
Yes.
But yeah, you can pre-order it on Amazon. And my first book, Little Michigan, is also still out, still available. Still easy to get on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble.
Awesome. All right. And I am Julia Allen. You can find me and my services at hijinkswriter.com. I'm Hijinks Writer on most social media except for Ginny and Tonic, JINNY and Tonic on TikTok. So I'll be making posts about the book coming out in October very soon. And then, Joe, do you have any announcements?
No, we're just going to keep showing programming. Oh, we should mention that this is, the last show of the big, we're taking a little break.
We're taking a little hiatus for July and August. Yeah.
And so In Progress is not going anywhere. I've already talked to Julia where we've negotiated, and we're going to go through the rest of this season and into the 2020 finish off 2021, I should say. We're going to finish off this year with In Progress. So it'll be back on the first Monday of every month in August, and from that point forward, we'll be
in September.
September, and then for the next 5 months, it'll be first Monday of every month, same time, same channel, Going now, we got a bunch of stuff going on, so just come and check us out.
Yes, and you can find Going Now everywhere.
You're here, so yeah. Oh, and smash the like button while you're here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, like and subscribe. With that, it is always time to Going Now. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in September.